Hi, and welcome to another episode of Second Impressions, Estound's web series where we discuss marketing questions we receive from viewers like yourself. I'm Trevor Heaton, and I've got my colleagues and marketing experts, Greg Bond and Erik Wolf, with me today. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Hey.
Oh,
what?
Fancy meeting you here.
Yeah. Social distancing at its finest. All right, gentlemen. We got a question from Jen, who is a marketing director. And the question we need to answer today is, our business leaders aren't making decisions. Each team is making decisions on their own and hoping for the best. It's not working. How do we stop this?
You definitely, well, the first step to stopping it, like many things, is admitting that you have a problem. And clearly Jen has gotten to that point. So now that we're here, what happens in organizations is that it's really hard, I think, for a lot of teams to realize that they're not always at the center of everything. It's not always about me and marketing when I'm dealing with sales or product development. It's not all about them, but we all really want to feel like we're driving the bus. And that mentality on its own is sort of a little bit toxic. So when you've got this situation where every team is sort of going in their own direction and nobody is going anywhere together, we really like to stress the importance of having cross-functional teams, implementing an OKR structure, and that stands for objectives and key results. What that is it allows management to level set the expectations, and then that's an objective. And then the key results are the series of things that we need to achieve in order to meet that objective. So using that structure allows all the teams to get on the same page, because if we say, well, hey, we need to increase revenue by 10% this year, and that's management's objective, that's going to take Jen's team in marketing to drive that. It's going to take participation and help from the sales team. It's going to require potentially help from product development and other departments. And so when you take that and then we say, these are the things that we're going to do, as I break down those objectives and key results, what is a key result for me might be an objective for somebody on my team. And what's a key result for them might be an objective for somebody else in the department. And so you get this structure where things cascade down and everybody is actually on the same tree and working towards the same goals. And then, of course, aligning the people, having those cross-functional meetings, getting people reset, having common metrics, having common measures for success are super, super important.
I think the difficult part in this isn't the idea and the process that's involved. It's the buy-in and getting leadership to commit to singular outcomes. So when you're setting those objectives, that objective setting, what it does is it makes you prioritize the things that will feed that objective more than other items might. And so examples of what leaders might do that runs counter to this would be like they want to both drive awareness and close more sales and increase their retention. And so while these things sound similar in some ways, they are often conflicting in practice when you're trying to figure out what it is you need to do. And so while leaders are often calling for bigger, better, faster, what they really need to do is say one of those at a time and then figure out how best to affect change in that area.
Right.
Because you can't do everything all at once. You don't have, your people only have a finite amount of time. Your departments only have so much budget. And so decisions are being made all the time. And as we know, when you sort of try to do everything all at once, you tend to you tend to do pretty mediocre work across the board. And so prioritization is important. And the other thing that happens as a natural result of this if you get management to buy into this structure, and if you get everybody to align on this stuff, the other thing that's created that's often missing is accountability. And in this case, where you have those conversations where if I say to my team, we're concentrating on growing revenue, we need to hit these goals, and then 2 months later I say, hey, have we gained any awareness? And they're going to tell me, well, no, that wasn't our objective. And they should be able to come and tell me that. I should be accountable for the fact that I led them down a road and then tried to move the goalposts.
Right.
And I think that's what's most difficult is this area where if something changes, you need to then publicize that to the rest of the employees so that they understand that there's been a shift. And I think a lot of times leadership makes these moves and goes in different directions. And a lot of the people, key players below them, are left behind in ways and always trying to catch up to what the leadership's actually doing and wanting. And so having ways of commemorating when goal lines do change is really important. You can't just like do it after the fact. You have to tell people this is where the vision is going in a different direction now. But oftentimes what occurs is these people will provide some results in an area that they thought they were being accountable to, and they'll realize that ended up not being the thing that the leadership wanted after 5 months had passed or 6 months had passed. And so that is extremely demotivating to the all your people below you because then they don't know exactly what it is they could do to make leadership happy. And that's when you start to see middle management and all these other types of behaviors that we associate with a stereotype where they're trying to avoid responsibility occur. It's
sort of
really
that bad corporate behavior kind of thing where that's when the sales rep and the marketing director start pointing fingers at each other. That's where product development comes in and says, well, nobody told us. And all of this toxic behavior that we're all familiar with tends to sort of come from is through these miscommunications. And we know that the world changes really fast. And if there's anything that 2020 has taught us is that when we lay out an objective for us that's 2 months, 3 months ahead, we can't take for granted that something more important isn't going to pop up. And so having a structure for communicating how people in the organization need to prioritize their time. And there are lots of ways to do it. The OKR structure I mentioned is only one way. But in that sense, when we say, hey, we've changed this objective, we can see visually how it trickles down to everybody else in the organization when we do that. And if we have a method for communicating that, and if we have a method for making sure that those changes are memorialized and are usable throughout the organization, you get a team that pivots a lot faster.
Exactly.
Understood. So where would Jen start? Let's talk about that within the organization, because there's all these departments making their own decisions. Where would Jen start within? Would she be talking to her peers, leadership? What would you recommend?
I think that it starts with having, there's a reason there's so many discussions in business around having a why. If everybody can kind of come together to agree to that vision, it always feels like when you go through those processes, like an unnecessary frivolity. It feels frivolous. It's like we're wasting time discussing theory and ideas instead of like actually grinding and closing sales. It doesn't seem as productive. But really, once you could get people to elicit the why and agree to it and share that common vision, the rest will start to come together. It's just that's not a one-time thing. It's something that you have to initiate and you have to ritualize and you have to keep doing it over and over again. And that's where I think you get the most resistance. It's like a lot of businesses are willing to go through those processes once, but then when something changes, they're not doing it all over again. And that's where I think most of those hangups end up occurring.
And this is something that people like Jen can't do in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Because what we're talking about is a problem that's born out of all of these various departments in an organization that aren't communicating, and Jen being middle management in one of those departments doesn't put her in a position where she's single-handedly empowered to turn the whole ship and get us all facing in one way. And so that's the hard part about being somebody like Jen. And she could potentially look at going to her managers, or potentially, depending on what the personalities in the organization are. In some companies, you might feel comfortable going horizontally across the company and talking to your peers in different departments and making sort of a larger pitch to the executive branch. Some companies wouldn't take that well. I think it's a cultural thing, depending on how feedback is taken from employees and management. But at some point, somebody's got to go and start talking to the executive level at this company and say, hey, we don't feel like this is working. What can we do?
Yeah. I think one of the strongest things somebody like Jen can do in her position that would immediately make her accountable and responsible is trying to provide the clarity of how unclear the situation is. And that if there was clarity, you'd have much more ability to drive success. But when people aren't seeing things clearly and understanding how an organization works together to drive bigger goals, they're never going to get anywhere.
Right. All good stuff. Erik, what do you got? Anything else? Summarize. It sounds like alignment and communication.
That's the crux of the whole thing. It's getting people to talk to each other and agree on things together, versus this thing where somebody in an office somewhere says something and we all go off in different directions and sort of scatter. It's what is it? United we stand, divided we fall, or something like that. It's one of those kinds of situations where we've got a directive and we're all pushing our own agendas, really, instead of figuring out how we can all work together.
Right. Any final thoughts, Greg?
No, I feel good about it.
Awesome. Well, that was good information, guys. Really appreciate your insight. So that concludes this episode of Second Impressions. If you have a question you would like answered by these two guys, go ahead and send us an email to secondimpressions down below at estound.com, and we'll be glad to answer that for you. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Later.